Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. Today's video is a repot, Phalaenopsis repot. But before we do that, before we start, thanks a bunch for all your wonderful comments and words of encouragement and all that stuff regarding the old, I can now do dicky ticker, because it's, you know, relatively speaking it's a permanent thing and I've just got to get on with it. Simple as that. So I will be a pill popper probably for the rest of my life, and it will deal with the problem. So that's how we have to be. So it's just an acceptance. There are occasions where it does just snap back in and fix itself, but they're not common. So there is a couple of treatments which I've been told I'm not having because I haven't got serious enough symptoms. So it's just as it is. This is it. It's as it is. I'm still not going mad and racing for the buses and climbing Everest and swimming the Channel. We're not going to be doing any of that. In fact, we're going to be carrying on exactly as we were before. But at least I know that is okay to do. Right, I will swing the camera around and we'll do a repot. Now what we're doing today is following on in this sort of series of following these Mini Phalaenopsis through. So these are mass produced, but not in the normal way, because they're mass produced in a nursery in England, and comparable size to the mass production units in places like the Netherlands and Germany. This is a relatively small affair. It's a family run business for a start, and yes, it is a business, but it's not run on ruthless business lines. Nonetheless, the reason for why I've chosen this one is simply because it's the one with the least number of buds that are capable of blasting, and effectively there aren't any capable of blasting because they're all open except that one, which is opening. Those sort of buds don't blast. I'll just quickly get one just to make the point. That one. Nope, that one. These are the sort of buds that blast. The small ones that are quite a long way from opening. They're the ones that are most likely to blast with a repot, with the blooms, you know, with the bloom spikes there. It's these little ones on the end, but ones that are open or virtually open, I've never had a problem with, so I just go ahead. So we will go ahead. Now the main reason for doing this, because I don't think these will have been long in the pot, but they have algae in the pot, and I want to find out whether they've actually got a plug, yeah? A seedling plug. Now I am going to take the spikes off, sorry, the stakes off. No, we won't be cutting the blooms off, and we will go careful not to waggle them around too much, because they are capable of snapping if you go too mad. So we will treat the whole thing gently, and we will lift it out of the pot, and most of the media will probably fall away. It is falling away, and yes, there is a plug in here. And so when I got two reasons why I want to change the media. One, I want to get that plug out before it does too much damage, and two, this media has got cocoa fibre in it, and the combination of the plug and the cocoa fibre means that the media is staying too wet too long. So I'm just gently teasing away, and this is the plug I'm on about. Now I'm hoping it will disintegrate. Now if the plug isn't too bad, then the roots inside won't actually be dead. The plugs that you normally get from the continental versions of the mass production units are usually absolutely jam-packed sphagnum moss, and roots inside those are often totally dead on the grounds that they've been in there a long time. They only repot if they absolutely have to, because it costs them money and they don't get it back because they sell them so cheap. So yes, so that plug, there wasn't much inside it, and the dead roots that I'm trimming off won't be as a consequence of the plug. So I'm still going to have to get on and repot these because I don't want them staying this wet. Not Phalaenopsis roots, it doesn't do them any good. So this is a bit stuck on in places, and as it's a spongy type thing. So what we've got to do now is look for rotten roots, and we haven't got too many, but we have got some. So we will deal with those. Got this one up here, that can go. So I can get the scissors in there. And the one above it can go. That can go. And as you come down here, these are blatantly obvious. You don't, you know, don't need to feel them. They're rotten. And quick look around the other side. That will do. So that was not too many roots to take off. There are quite a few roots left. What there isn't at this point in time is very active growing root tips. There's a root tip here that will grow if it's in a happy media, as will this one. But many of the others have stopped growing. They may branch out. It is capable of branching. It has branches on the roots, so it can be a branching root system. So that's good. So that's it. That's all it needs doing. So it's going back in the same pot. There's nothing wrong with the pot, but it needs a good clean. It needs the algae taken off and a good clean, and then with some fresh media and back in its sleeve pot to keep the light out, it won't get the algae this time round. There is some algae on the roots, but that will just die off once it gets in the dark. Right, so I'll have a tidy up and I'll be back. Okay, nice clean pot. This is going in medium bark. This medium bark does have bark in it that I would class as heading towards small as well as medium. So it is a bit of a mix. This comes from Orchid Accessories, basically because I can get it brought to a show and don't have to pay postage. The other place I can get bark is at Burnham's when I visit Burnham's, or again, they will bring it to a show. So I don't ever pay for postage for bark. This is Portuguese bark and it's quite good. I won't say it's the best there is in the UK, but it's pretty good. Seems to last well, and it doesn't take too long to start wetting properly, because new bark's a right pain because it won't actually get wet. Water just runs off it. It's as though it's got like a waterproof coating on it. Anyway, simplest thing in the world to repot a Phalaenopsis. Once you've trimmed the dead roots off, a tip, if you're sort of new to the game and this, that and the other, try and do it all dry. I know a lot of people say, oh, you should soak the bark before you use it. Well, I'll show you why it's better not to. I'm just going to get some of this out in the tray because it'll be easier without the bag in the way. You can go straight back in there, the tray's clean. Okay, so we've got to position our plant at roughly the right depth. I've put some in there originally. These are air cone pots, yeah? So they have like a recess in the bottom round the edge and a raised centre, and that lets air in. So it stops the bottom of the pot getting soggy, because often there's no roots right down at the bottom of the pot. So we position our plant in the pot where we want it, and then all we do is pour our dry bark in and tap the sides. Notice it's going down to the bottom of the pot. If the pot, the roots and the bark were soaking wet, this wouldn't happen, it would stick. It would all stick to each other, it would stick to the sides of the pot, and you'd end up with big gaps. Which it's not the end of the world, but it's better if you haven't got them. So, you turn the plant round, some more in, gently tap. You can see it dropping down. As it's dropping down, it's filling in all the gaps, ready to go. And another tip, don't fill your pot right up to the top. Because if you do, when you water it, half the bark will float off the sides of the pot. So just enough to cover the roots if you can. If there's a couple of roots near the top of the pot that are not covered, don't panic. Phalaenopsis often grow aerial roots, so that's nothing untoward. But if you can, try and cover them all up. Check under the first pair of leaves to make sure you haven't left a gap. And that's it. No pressing down, nothing. And now if you look at the pot, there's no air gaps. And because of the way the roots were, we can see some of the roots. That's handy to be able to see. See, if you use a big pot, all the roots will be in the middle, and you won't see any of them. It makes life more difficult to work out when to water, because Phalaenopsis roots tell you when they want to water. It's when they're dry. When they're dry, they go either a silvery colour or a white colour or a grey colour, but not green. The only time they stay green when they're dry is if they are badly covered in algae, which these aren't. They have got some on some of the roots. But so now you've got choices at this point. If you're potting one with spikes, if your spikes had stakes, you've got the option to put the stakes back on. Because as you can see now, without the stakes, this pot is that wide. Yeah? On a shelf. Whereas with the spikes upright, it's this wide as the two leaves. So I will try and put the stakes back on. I may fail miserably. It depends on whether the bark is capable of holding the stake good enough to be able to put the spike back on. And in this case, it is. So that one can certainly go back on. So that's one. Now we'll see if the other one will. It's, as I say, it's totally dependent on whether there's enough grip to hold the stake. I'm going right down the very edge of the pot, which is where the deepest bark is. If you remember, there was a recess at the bottom. We need to tuck inside that bloom and tuck inside there. Yes, there we go. So that's now taking up a lot less space on the shelf. And if you've got a tag, put it back in. I'm wondering why this hasn't got a tag, because I thought I tagged all of the Phalaenopsis. Oh, I know what's happened. The first 4 of the Mini Phalaenopsis that arrived have got tags, and they've been given a letter, because there's no names, so they've just been, you know, the tag just says Phalaenopsis A or Phalaenopsis N or something. They've just been given a letter of the alphabet, so that when I record when blooms open and things like that, I know which plant to put it against. That's all it's for. It's a pretend name, basically. But the second lot of 4 that I bought, the dirt cheap ones that have been reduced right down, although I've labelled them in my notes, I haven't actually done the labels yet. So I need to get on with that. So that's it. A very simple Phalaenopsis repot. They become more difficult the bigger they are, and the bigger the root system, especially if the roots are starting to fail, because you've then got a lot of decisions as to which roots to cut off, which ones to leave, and there's a lot more of it. So, you know, it's more work. But simply, it's just a repeat of what I've just done, the fact that the plant may be 3 times as big and take you 3 times as long, the task is the same. It's the same skill set, the same requirements to actually get the job done. So anyway, that will now have a good water for 2 reasons. 1, it'll settle the bark in, and 2, it'll wash the dust off. The roots are wet, so I'm not watering it because the roots need water. I'm watering it to get the dust off. And then the whole thing inside the pot will dry quite quickly because the bark will just go and soak the water out of the roots. So they will now dry off quite quickly, because even though I'm going to water the bark, it will be dry in a day or 2 because it's brand new, shiny new. So there we go, Phalaenopsis repot. We have discovered that these Phalaenopsis do have the spongy fibrous plug, but they haven't been in them so long as it's a desperate must do it now task to get them out. However, they hold a hell of a lot of water, and because the mix that's been used has got the cocoa fibre in it, fibre chunks, they also hold a lot of water. These are Phalaenopsis, and they are no longer living at 28 degrees for 14 hours a day like they were in the nursery. So I can't leave them wet as long as they will be in my sort of temperatures. So there we go, and see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.